6 p.m. in Douala, economic capital of Cameroon. You're watching the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Spectrum Television. Coming up in this newscast, the 2021 African Nations Football Championship mascot Tara has hit the city of Douala today for a public presentation. He was received by the governor of the Littoral region, Samuel Dieudonné Iva-Diboa. Catherine Cornet will be telling us more in this news. Also in this newscast, the Minister of Mines and Technological Development, alongside 4 other members of the government, have visited the construction site of the Cameroon Society for Industry and Exploitation of Wood in Edeya. Onila Donet will complete that story in this newscast. Those were our top stories. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining in on the 6 p.m. news on STV. As announced in the headlines, the 2021 African Nations Football Championship mascot Tara has hit the city of Douala for a public presentation. He was received by the minister. He was received by the governor of the Littoral region, Samuel Dieudonné Iva-Diboa. And from Douala, he will hit the southwest region, where the same exercise will be carried out. Catherine Cornet reports.
As the days narrow down to the African Nation Championship, slated to take place on January 16, 2021 in Cameroon, the mascot, described as Tara, hits the city of Douala today, December 29, for a public presentation. Received by the governor of the Littoral region, Samuel Dieudonné Iva-Diboa, and the senior divisional officer for Wuri Division, Benjamin Boutou, the administrators officially handed over the mascot of the 2021 African Nations Football Championship to the local organizing committee for a tour. With a mammoth crowd, the caravan of the mascot, Tara, moved from the Place du Gouvernement to the Douala 1, 2, 5 and 4 municipalities. Though the presence of the mascot caused a huge traffic jam in the country's economic hub, many gathered along the road to have a glimpse of Tara that will represent African football come January 16. It should be noted that the mascot will be visiting Limbe and Boya in the southwest region tomorrow, December 30th, 2020 for the same exercise. The tour of the mascot is limited to cities that will host matches for the African Nation Championship come January 16 to February 7, 2021.
Douala. And on to something else. The president of United for Cameroon Association, Alice Com, has organized a press conference today in Douala to celebrate the just released Cameroon Renaissance Movement Party militants who were arrested on September 22 after an unauthorized protest march in the city of Douala. According to Alice Com, their action is that of courage and bravery, and hence they are worth celebrating. Let's hear more about this event from Alice Com in this interview.
All of them were arrested illegally, as usual, arbitrary, as usual, put in jail for some of them 2 years for nothing. So they were just released, and we wanted to celebrate them as our ambassadors of freedom, as our brave soldiers of rights for all of us. So my kids from the diaspora in the United States, Canada, Europe, decided to give something to materialize it today by organizing this meeting together and by giving them our proof of our solidarity and patriotic feelings. All of them were arrested illegally, as usual, arbitrary, as usual, put in jail for some of them 2 years.
The Minister of Mines and Technological Development, alongside other members of the government, have toured the construction site of the Cameroon Society of Industry and Exploitation of Wood in Edea. This visit took place today, Monday, December 20.
An interministerial visit has been made to the construction site of the Cameroonian Society for Industry and Exploitation of Wood in Edea. The visit, headed by the Minister of Mines and Technological Development, Gabriel Ndodo, alongside 4 other members of government, namely the Minister of Forest and Wildlife, the Minister of Transport, the Minister Delegate of the Ministry of Finance, the Secretary of State, and the Minister of Employment and Training, falls in line with one of the resolutions prescribed by the Prime Minister, Head of Government, Chief Joseph Diongutei, on November 18, 2020, in regards to the takeover of the former Selukam site by the Cameroonian Society for Industry and Exploitation of Wood, in its acronym SIEB. A guided tour was carried out in the various sites where the said project will be implemented in order to receive explanations on the establishment of the company. The project has been divided into 3 phases and is set to run from 2021 to 2030. With more than 20 years of experience in the wood industry, the SIEB company proposes to the government the establishment of an integrated complex for the production and processing of wood. Its productions will be mainly intended for the international market at 85% and locally up to 15%. SIEB is a public limited company under Cameroonian law, whose share capital belongs 100% to Cameroonians.
And now we take economy as our reporter Oni Ladonet takes us back to the economic objectives set by the head of state, His Excellency Paul Biya, in his speech on December 31, 2019.
The government's 2020 economic, financial, social and cultural program, which was presented recently before the National Assembly, is consistent with this trend. It is based on a 4% growth assumption, which is expected to keep us on the path to emergence by 2035. Moreover, our draft National Development Strategy for the 2020 to 2030 period seeks to achieve the same objective. I wish to avail myself of this opportunity to thank our foreign partners, including the IMF, which I have already mentioned, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, and the French Development Agency for their budget support and assistance to our structural reforms. Does this mean that we may now rest on our laurels? Of course not. Our goal remains to become an emerging economy by 2035. However, what with the unstable global context and the tensions that are jeopardizing trade, we may need to redouble our efforts to maintain our country on the path of sustainable economic recovery. I believe we can do it. We must consider such recovery an overriding obligation that will mobilize all our energies. Accordingly, it requires not only improving the living conditions of Cameroonians, but also ensuring the peaceful exercise of democratic rights.
We remain in economy as our reporter gives us a rundown on the economic activities carried out this year.
The 4% economic growth experienced back in 2019 was a reassuring step towards better days for Cameroon's economy come 2020. With the head of state envisaging economic recovery, these ambitions got shattered few months into the new year with the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic in March. The virus, which had gripped the entire world, had to be contained, and as such, several barrier measures were being implemented, amongst which is the closure of borders, an action that gave a huge blow to the Cameroon's economy. According to the Minister of Commerce, on June 2020, the volume of trade had drastically declined to 16%, with a decline in export in 14% and importation at 16%. In terms of employment, a study carried out by the Cameroon Interpatronal Group (SHICAM) shows that 92.5% in April, the proportion of companies negatively affected by the health crisis had rose to 96.6% at the end of June 2020. In addition, about 53,346 workers were put on technical unemployment and 13,834 were dismissed due to the health crisis. In order to help the small enterprises affected by the COVID-19, a line of credit between the general company and the European Bank and investments will be secured on the cover of an agreement. The general company will open a line of credit of 25 billion CFA francs and the BGFI a line of credit of 10 billion CFA francs for the small and medium-sized enterprises in Cameroon. Still in the year 2020, the Cameroon government admits its failure in the strategy documents for growth and development, which couldn't meet up the 10 years objectives. The Minister of Economy, Planning and Regional Development presented the replacement of the strategy document for growth and employment, the National Development Strategy for 2020 up to 2030. With objective to ameliorate the living conditions of the population, grant them access to basic social services, and also improve governance. Unlike previous years, international partners keep filling up the national coffers. In response to the government's cry in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic, the European Union offered 6 billion CFA francs, which enters into the global check of 18 billion mobilized by the European Union in the fight against the COVID-19 virus. With 2021 around the corner, the COVID-19 is still present and plans are being drawn while taking into consideration its existence.
And on our health page, an association of medical doctors... And on our health page tonight, an association of medical doctors today in a press conference at SHICAM schooled us on cervical cancer, which is most common in women. They talked about the causes, the prevention, and possible treatment. Catherine Kone gives us details.
In a bid to create awareness on cervical cancer in Cameroon, an association today in Douala in a press conference lecture on the causes, the origin, symptoms and treatment of cervical cancer. Cervical cancer and breast cancer being the most common in Cameroon, medical doctors' review is as a result of lack of information and for the fact that many women ignore going to the hospital after experiencing the symptoms. Cervical cancer is ranked the 7th most common cancer in the world and is the 2nd most common diagnosed cancer after breast cancer and the 3rd leading cause of cancer death among female in less developed countries. According to Dr. Kamini, a gynecologist, a cervical cancer is a malignant tumor of the lowermost part of the uterus that can be prevented by PAP, smear screening, and a HPV vaccine. Cervical cancer is said to begin in the cells of the cervix, and a sexually transmitted infection play a role in causing most cervical cancer. According to the medical doctors, when exposed to HPV, the body's immune system typically prevents the virus from doing harm. In a small percentage of people, however, the virus survives for years, contributing to the process that causes some cervical cells to become cancer cells. The symptoms include vaginal bleeding after intercourse, between periods and after menopause, watery, bloody vaginal discharge that may be heavy and have a foul odor, pelvic pain, amongst others. However, the risks of developing cervical cancer, they concluded, can be reduced by having screening tests and receiving a HPV vaccine.
We now take you on our foreign page with this report from our VOA.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was first, getting the vaccine live on prime-time Israeli television, followed by senior Israeli officials.
I thought it was important to set a personal example so all Israelis would go and vaccinate themselves, because I think that if we do this together, we'll beat the corona, and sooner than people expect.
Israel quickly rolled out its vaccination campaign, with more than 250,000 Israelis vaccinated in the first week. Prime Minister Netanyahu says that Israel will be the first country to eradicate COVID-19, a goal public health officials say is possible.
The reason Israel can do that is because Israel has a very, very sound public healthcare system. Our system is basically public, and it's being run by one of the 4 healthcare funds. You can choose your own healthcare fund. They must accept you, and they provide you with a very, very good healthcare basket, by the way, including corona tests for free and including the vaccination.
At Jerusalem's Arena Sports Stadium, Israelis seemed pleased with the efficient vaccination campaign, although less pleased with the lockdown and upcoming election.
It's highly organized. From the time we walked in till we were inoculated took 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. It's been wonderful.
I don't think they've had the courage to make some of the decisions that they needed to have made, but so as far as the vaccinations are concerned, they've handled it very well.
It is ironic that as we had positive news about what people are calling the beginning of the end of the pandemic, that we were then hit over the head with this scourge of a 4th election, where I am doubtful that results will be any better.
In the upcoming March election, Prime Minister Netanyahu hopes Israelis will remember the successful vaccination campaign more than the economically destructive 3 lockdowns. Linda Gradstein for VOA News, Jerusalem.
And that report brings us to the end of this newscast. Don't go away. More news comes to you at 8 p.m. in the French newscast with Oriane Donken. With me, it's good night.